Welcome. This is TechWorks technical training of the Integrated Messaging and Reporting System, better known as the IMR. This is part 3, programming of the IMR. I'm Mark Dundas, and I'll be your host. A little bit of quick housekeeping. This is designed for people who are going to design and install TechWorks IMR. We assume that you've already seen the technical training for CC2 and NC products. That is critical because that's where the IMR connects to and how it gets its information. If you don't understand CC2 and NC, you're probably not going to understand what we're talking about here. As much as I'm going to try to share all the information about an IMR, there is so much and it is so complex. I'm going to encourage you to keep the IMR system guide handy throughout this training and every time you touch an IMR, because there's a lot more information in there than I can ever share in a video. The video would go on for hours. This is a 3-part series. This is part 3, system programming. There is a presentation guide handout available on the website for you to follow along and take notes. And there is certification testing available for those that want to be a certified IMR installer. If you take and pass all 3 parts of the exam, we'll be happy to certify you. Let's get started. If you are connecting the IMR to an IP network that uses the addressing of 192.168.1.whatever, you can just plug this thing in. You don't need to follow this step. However, if you are connecting to any network that has any other credentials other than 192.168.1, you need to connect the monitor and keyboard before you get started. The login screen will appear. You log in as installer. That's not case sensitive. You can do uppercase, lowercase, combination, doesn't matter. Password 1234 by default, very simple. We highly recommend that you change this password. The installer is the highest level of user of access and can change everything in this system. That can be a real problem for you. You get your programming all done and somebody gets in there and messes it all up. We also encourage you to back up whatever you've done, and we'll talk about that and how to do it, but back up your programming so that in case somebody does get into it. If you change the password as we recommend, we think you should write it on the inside of the lid. Keep it where nobody can see it and nobody can easily get at it. Take the 4 screws out of the lid, write the new password on the inside of the lid, screw the lid back on, and then only installers that need to get into it know where it's hidden. If you forget the password that you put in and you don't write it down, you have to take this box out of service and send it to the factory, and we have to reprogram it from the beginning to reset the password. When logged in, you'll see the About screen. This is your menu across the top of all your options. These are available only to the installer. Other users don't see all these menu choices. You're going to go immediately to the Settings tab. The title up here in the top is what this website is called. So you're looking at a website. When you're plugged into the IMR, you're technically looking at the IMR through a browser built into the IMR. When you go to the network, you're going to log on to the IMR as if you were going to a website on the World Wide Web. It's no different. It's the same thing. This name right here is what's going to be in the upper left-hand corner of your browser when you're looking at this thing. The IMR time and date are critical to a lot of different things because this device logs every button push. So we encourage you to set that as early in the programming process as possible. It'll help you along the way. The IP address by default, as I said, is 192.168.1.97. You can leave it that way. Doesn't matter to us. But if your IP format for your network is anything other than 192.168.1, you need to change it to match your network and then add the subnet and the gateway. 97 as a point ID works pretty well because that's above most everything else and it doesn't conflict with anything. So let's say you change this to 192.170.5. I would still use 97. That's a good choice. Not mandatory, doesn't mean anything. You can do whatever you want. Save everything. Always push this save button on the bottom of all of these screens because otherwise you'll exit this screen and lose all your data. You don't want to do that. Everything else other than this is available to you from the network once you plug this into your LAN. So get this part right and then off you go. Let's talk about connecting to the TechWorks network first of all. So whether it's CC or NC, you connect to the TechWorks data network. That twisted pair that goes to the annunciators just connects to the screw terminal on the IMR. Then you power the IMR on and you go around and you push every button in the system. The IMR will build a database of all the points. Then you connect your IMR with a Cat6 patch cable to your switch or router. And then from any PC in the network, you can access that IMR and do the rest of your programming. All you have to do is open a browser. Chrome works extremely well. It's simple. You type / 192.168. Whatever you put in there in the address bar, and the login screen should appear, just like when you had a monitor plugged directly into the IMR. Your About screen should appear, and again, up across the top is your menu. Let's go through the menu. Home, this button on the left, this is where you go to see the display of your points. If you're a simple user, all you can do is go to user, or go to home, I should say. Home takes you to what your display is. This tells you about the system, but home shows you the pretty picture. Point mapping, this is the points of all the buttons you just pushed. Pooling, these are groups of rooms that are tracked for keeping track of people and telling providers which patient is next. Reporting, this is how you output all the data that has been logged in this system. Upload, this is how you bring stuff into the IMR, meaning updates to the firmware, layouts, things like that. Download is how you do a backup. It's how you do your exports of layouts if you don't have a copy and you need a copy of what's in there. Settings. This is the details of the system configuration. This is where you just went in and changed the IP address. Settings is where you do all of the system-wide configuration. Users. This is the critical part because these are your credentials for users. And that determines their menu options. It determines what they see when they click on the home screen. It determines everything about what they can do when they log in. Layouts, this is the pretty pictures. Layouts are custom graphics that are designed and made by TechWorks. You send us the information, we build you a layout, send it back to you, and you upload it into the system. Test panels, these are buttons that replicate every button that you pushed that's in your point map. And what it does is it gives the installer the ability to activate and deactivate lights throughout the system without getting up from his chair. When he's programming, it's very, very handy to have the test panels there. The About screen, again, is the screen you're looking at now, and it has all the details about the IMR. You want to know this when you call us. If you are looking for support, tell us which product you got, what version of software and firmware. Let's talk about the home screen. Home screen is a display of the activity and the status of all the lights. So everything on the system is shown on this home screen. The list mode is the default. So you have a list of locations over here on the left. Your columns are your colors. So this would be all your reds, this would be all your yellows, this would be all your greens, this would be all your blues. The labels of what these are programmed by the installer, and this little legend over here tells you what a red light means, what a yellow light means, what a green light means, what a blue light means. And these are also listed across the top of the column. So here's your legend of what a blue light means, and here would be all your blue lights by room number. Bubbles takes those same lights that would be in a horizontal here. So this would be red, yellow, green, and blue on a list mode. It puts them all in a circle on the screen and labels it with the room name or number so that you know what lights are on in that room. It's very simple, just a different way of looking at the data. Then there's layouts. These are the custom graphics that TechWorks builds from the information you give us. These are custom HTML pages. They're the floor plans of the building typically, and you supply us the labels with the graphics so that we know what you want to call them. The more information you give us, the more we can help you. This is what staff would see when they click that home screen. So when they click the home screen, it goes to the website. Here's your web page number or name up here in the corner, I should say, title. This is your legend, and here's the floor plan that one of our dealers supplied us. Now, this is what it would look like if all the lights were on. This will never happen. Nobody ever has all the lights on at the same time. This is done for testing just to make sure that everything is working and visible and looks nice and so on and so forth. But typically what you'd have is a blue light here and a red light here and a green light here and something else. When you're done with this and you want to get back into the IMR, you click this little gear down here and it takes you back to the login screen. Point mapping. Let's talk in detail about what a point map is. So remember, you pushed all the buttons on the system and it logged all those in your system. Well, the way it logged them is by a 3-digit address for every point in the system. So let's talk about this relative to a clinical system, the 4-color system. Your buttons are labeled with a master, column, and button number. So 111 through 884 is your CC addressing. What does that mean? 1 means this is the first master, first column, first light in that column would be this red light at the top of column 1. 884 would be the 8th master, 8th column, 4th button. That's the highest number in the system. The very first thing you have to understand to get a unit to correspond to an annunciator or enunciate on that panel is the master address has to match. So you're telling this station, I want you to display on this master. The next thing you're going to do, once you've got it master address 0, column 0, you're going to tell it the column on the station that you want this to be on is column 0, meaning all dip switches off. So all dip switches off for master, that's master 0. Column 0 is all dip switches off. Now that automatically lands it right here so that your point ID, your address, remember, is 000. So all dip switches off. But your point, this top red, is 111, meaning first master, first column, first light. On an NC system, you've got 2 sets of 4 columns on the annunciator. So you got the left 4 columns and the right 4 columns. The way these correspond is master address 0 of a control module. These jacks, port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 correspond to these lights on the annunciator in these 4 columns. Column 1 is 111 again, that's that upper left, through 144. So meaning first master, 4th column, 4th light would be this bottom right hand, which corresponds to that bottom right hand jack. The second half of of the annunciator is control module 1. It can be any combination of control modules in sequence. So the master address that matches is always going to be the one on the left. The next one in numeric order is always going to be the one on the right. So this could be 2 and 3, 5 and 6, doesn't matter as long as they're in sequence. And then what's going to happen in this case, this is now control module 2, which is binary 1. Remember, it's a hex switch up here, so it's 0, and this one's at 1, which means this is control module 1, this is control module 2, and then your points go right on across. So your last one over here on the lower right is master address 2, column 4, point 4. So master address 2, column 4, point 4 is that lower right-hand corner. Point mapping. Let's talk about how this point mapping is arranged and edited. So you got a log of all the push buttons. You went around and pushed them. This is the screen that shows you all the buttons you pushed. 4 button panels appear in sequence. So 111, 112, 113, and 114. That's that first 4 button panel. Dome lights and room stations with the same address don't appear twice because they're all the same point to the system. The red light on the dome light is the same as the red light on the 4 button panel. The colors right here, see this column labeled colors? They're automatically labeled red, yellow, green, and blue if you set it up that way in settings. We'll talk more about that when we get to settings, but it'll automatically label these points if they're sequential. If you throw in a restroom or something like that that's not got sequential, then it won't label it that way. Let's talk about room. The room name is the physical name of the location, typically a room number. It can say exam and then a number. It doesn't have to be a number. It can be alpha, it can be alphanumeric, it can be whatever you want. The critical part is that these have to match. If these 4 associated with this 4 button panel don't all match, it won't create a bubble with these, or on the list mode, they won't all line up in a column. They're only going to, or in a row, I should say. They're only going to line up in a row if they're all labeled identically. So that is critical. How you label these points becomes super critical. It's case sensitive. So if you do all lowercase on the word exam and then all uppercase on the word exam, it won't group them together. You got to have it identical. The current pool, this column here, shows that this particular point is in a pool. If it's not, it won't show it. The description. This is a very, very useful tool because it helps you later on when you're identifying stations and buttons for text messages and pooling and other things. This description tells you a little more about it than just the room name and the color. It can tell you whatever you want to type in here. Makes no difference, but it makes your life easier for retrieving this for reports. Message. This is telling you if the point is going to send a text message or a message to a beeper. Delete, this is for convenience, so you can quickly delete a point if you want to get rid of it for some reason. And the checkboxes allow you to select multiple stations for deletion. Let's talk about editing an individual point. So if I click on the point 111, this little menu drops down, and then it gives me the ability to see and change multiple things about this. So the point color, again, is preset, but you can change it if you want to. There's a little drop-down menu there. The room number, as I said, this has to be consistent across points that are supposed to be associated with each other. The current pool is just telling you that this is in a pool. It's not allowing you to edit it. You can't do anything with poolings. That's on a different screen. The description, again, this is where you type in further information about this point. It can be extremely helpful. Makes life a lot easier if you fill that in. Message type. This is if you're going to send a message associated with this button. Now remember, we're on the red or top button on station number 1. So if I want that button to send a text message, I tell it it's an email, because to us, text messages are really an email, and we'll talk more about that later. But right now, just understand that the way we get a text message out of the system is by sending an email to a cell phone number. So you're going to tell it you want to make this message type an email. If you don't want to send an email and you want to talk to serial devices like a pocket pager or a dialer, your other option here is serial. This means it's going to talk out the USB port to some other piece of hardware. It's not going to talk over the internet. This is going to talk over the internet. This is going to talk out a serial port. That's what this is telling you. The next thing is message destination. This can be an email, or as I said, it can be a cell phone number at vtech.com, which is a cell number of a Verizon user. It's again an email, but it goes to Verizon's transmission mechanism to send the text message to the cell phone. You can have multiple email addresses. So meaning that when you push this red button, it can send to multiple people, multiple emails, multiple text messages, unlimited number. You just fill this in. If this is a serial message type rather than an email, this would be where you'd put in beeper numbers. So under message destination, you would put in a beeper number or a group number. You now see that you've got 4 different messages here. You got a message for on, you got a message for when it slow flashes, fast flashes, or when it goes off. So what we're telling you is when this red button changes states from off to on, it'll send this message. From on to slow flashing, it'll send a different message. When it goes from slow flashing to fast flashing, it'll send a different message. When it turns off, it'll send a different message. This is extremely useful if different staff responds to different signal levels. Doesn't have to be used that way. You leave them blank, it won't send anything. But if you put something in here, it will send it when that light changes to this state. Pools that it's enrolled in, this just tells you if this thing is enrolled in a pool. This tells you the current pool. This tells you the pools that it is included in. So multiple. Can't edit anything here, just information. Again, save your work before you leave. Let's talk about Dr. Follow. Before we get into pools, you need a clear understanding of how Dr. Follow works. Again, by using the name of these areas or these parts of the facility, we create a group of these lights, okay? But there's a difference. A pool is a group of rooms. Think of it that way. This doctor is green, and he's covering these rooms. Another doctor is green also, but he's covering a different group of rooms. 2 pools, Doctor 1, Doctor 2. The doctor goes to the next patient by the one that is slow flashing. So what the IMR is doing is sitting there keeping track of when you push these green buttons and saying, okay, This one was pushed first. It's slow flashing. The IMR tells this light, change to slow flashing so the doctor knows you're next. If Doctor 2 has a patient in a room that is ready for him, his will start slow flashing. Let's talk about what determines a pool. It's typically geography in a building, which is tied to a discipline. So these 4 rooms are dedicated to a particular physician and his staff, tied to this nurse's station, and they do something unique over in this corner of the building. The ways to make a pool. In hardware, it's done with a dip switch that says track all of these green lights together. The problem with this is that it also tracks all the yellow and all the blue lights together. So you can't create a pool out of 2 yellow lights and 2 green lights and 2 blue lights. It's going to be all the green lights, all the blue lights, and all the yellow lights are going to be tracked together. Not very flexible. So if you want flexibility, you need an IMR. The IMR has the ability to track any button, any light, any color in a pool. Let's talk about a swing room and how this might work. You create 2 pools. This particular room is in 2 pools. It's in this pool one day and another pool the next day. It's in 2 pools, but it's which one is assigned. Are you assigned to Doctor 1 or Doctor 2? So let's look at how this might look graphically. This room right here is in the middle between 2 areas. One day it's part of this activity in this group because they have a high need. The next day, this group over here needs that room. So you create 2 pools, one for today, one for tomorrow. Each one contains that room, but only one pool is active at a time. Look at the pooling screen. We're going to add or create a new pool. You're going to get this little screen right here. The very first thing is you got to name your pool. Name it with something that defines the function. It could be a doctor, it could be an X-ray technician, but it's who's using it. Again, pools are tied to users, so kind of name it something that ties to a user function. Tracking. Once you've got this filled in and you hit save, you get this little drop-down menu. The pool name that you assign to it will appear here. Then your tracking window is right here. What kind of tracking do you want? Your options are none, tracking 1, tracking 2, and tracking 3. None means there's no tracking. Why would you want a pool if there's no tracking? Could be just a view only. You're creating a group of rooms that someone wants to see. You're not tracking anybody's movement. You're just showing them. So it's a non-tracking pool. Tracking 1, this is good old-fashioned doctor follow next patient. It means that in sequence, it creates a list of whose button was pushed first and the next room slow flashes. Tracking 2 is a little different. What happens is the current location that you're in is fast flashing, and it's showing you on the display your next one is slow flashing. Normally, your next patient room wouldn't start slow flashing until you turned off the green light you're in. But if you want the fast flash feature, what this will do is when you enter that room and you push that button, it'll turn it to fast flashing, and your next room will start slow flashing at that point. It's up to you. Don't have to use it that way. Tracking 3 is typically for X-ray technicians where you got 2 X-ray technicians that are covering the same area. What happens is you set it up so that the next room for one guy is fast flashing and for the other it's slow flashing. So that way they're not missing any patients, but they're taking the next patient in order. So as I'm done with my fast flashing patient and you're dealing with a slow flashing patient, I turn out my current fast flashing light, the next one in the queue starts fast flashing. Gives me the ability to skip and cover a lot of people really quickly. The user. This is who is going to be assigned to this, and this ties to the user profile and how the pool is seen. This is the key right here. Who's going to use this thing? This is Dr. Jones, and it ties to his login credentials. The pool type can be either view or logging. If it's view only, you're just going to see the status of things on the display. If it's logging, it's going to track somebody's movements. To add points, you simply click on the add points and it gives you this little drop down of all the points that are available and you select them. Typically, it's going to be the same color. So you're going to want 111, 121, 131, 141. You're going to want all the same colors, but it could be different colors. That's up to you. That's going to get crazy for somebody to keep track of, but you can do whatever you want. Edit and make changes to an existing pool. If you were trying to edit a pool up here by clicking the edit button, it won't allow you to get into this screen if it is assigned. See these assignment buttons? If it's assigned to someone, you can't get in and edit it. You can only edit it if it's unassigned. So you would first have to unassign it by clicking the assign unassign button and then go in and edit it. Click edit. Always save. Don't forget. Assigning pools. So this is where the rubber meets the road. If a pool is not assigned, it is inactive. For a pool to track movement or view, it must be active or assigned. Dr. 1, green rooms. He's got 4 rooms. If it's assigned and you check tracking, now it's going to keep track of where he is. So remember, you got this tracking box you need to check as well. If it is a tracking pool or logging pool, see here where this says logging type. If it's a view only, these are grayed out. You can't track. But if you set it up as a logging pool, you have to click track him now and assign to get it to track him. Dr. 2 would have his own pool, 4 different rooms, and then you have to click track and assign. X-ray technician would have a pool of all yellow rooms. And if you want it to track, you don't have to, you can just have it be assigned and it's a view only. But if you made it a logging and you hit tracking, then it would tell the X-ray technician which one is next. Next patient will then slow flash for that provider. If a pool is assigned but not tracking, it will view only, it's a display only. This would be used at nurses' stations. They might see multiple doctors. They might see everybody, the doctor, everybody. Think about swing rooms for a moment. You create the 2 pools. The swing room is in both pools. Which pool is assigned? This is where the rubber meets the road. Is it assigned to Dr. 1 or is it assigned to Dr. 2? That's what you do. You click track and you hit assign for that day, and that assigns that pool to one of the users. It's who it belongs to, Dr. 1 or Dr. 2. If you have a room color, meaning an individual room, room 3, button green, it can only be in one pool at a time. You can't track that green button in 2 pools at the same time. A color can easily be in 2 pools at the same time and viewed at the same time if one, the nurse's station, is display only, and the other pool is the doctor's tracking pool. So that's how you get somebody to see that room color in 2 different pools. Let's talk about reporting. The reporting screen. This is how you retrieve stored data. So every one of those button pushes in the system is time and date stamped. You go in and you select a type of report. We have options of built-in reports. It just helps you retrieve the information you're looking for. You select a start and stop time and date. And then once you have the log of events, so it's going to give you an output of all of the events, you rubber band around the events and copy and paste those into Excel or some other database manager that you use to manipulate the data. we're going to give you the data out of the database. So every button push is logged, time and date stamped. The more you put on there, like description of those points, the easier it's going to be for you to find your data. First, you got to know when an event occurred, put in the time and date. Once you've got that information, the more that information is labeled, the easier it's going to be to manipulate and retrieve and identify. Always identify the stuff. Okay, let's talk about uploads and downloads. Uploads are very easy. You go in and you click choose a file. This is only available from a network computer. So you can't plug into the monitor and keyboard into the IMR directly and plug a stick in. Doesn't work. You have to be at a network computer. You click on choose a file. This would be, then another menu appears down here. You select the file you want to retrieve from this network PC. Could be a stick plugged into a USB drive. We don't care at this point, but it's got to be a network computer. It's used for restoring backups, updating firmware, and installing layouts. Download is the opposite. You're now going to take stuff out of the IMR and you're going to select what you're going to take. This is used to retrieve layouts that were already stored in there and to do a backup of your complete system. We highly encourage you to back up your data regularly, especially when you're programming, because you never know when you make a big mistake and you want to put it back to where you started. Let's talk about the settings screen. This is the one you saw when you first went in to set your IP address. This is the most critical screen to the IMR operation because it affects the entire system. It's system-wide. It's not just something that happens with an individual button. It's what happens with the whole shebang. All the settings can be edited from the network. Why would you ever connect a monitor directly to the IMR? Because you have to edit that IP address so you can see the thing from the network. If you don't edit that first before you plug it in the network, you can't see it. You can't ping it. There is nothing that can only be edited from the IMR itself. Everything can be edited from the network once you can see the IMR on the network. The title up here, again, this is what appears in the upper left-hand corner of the browser as your website name. It also, if you don't have a layout, if you go to your home screen and you don't have a layout and what you have is either a list mode or the bubbles, the name of this is what will appear as the name of that display. The IP address. This can be any standard IP address. Anything that is allowed under Internet Protocol can be used. It must be set right for you to see this on the network. And the IMR must be rebooted or powered down and repowered to get the IP address settings to change. So you tell the IMR what IP address to use. The network doesn't see that until it is disconnected from the network and reconnected. At that point, those changes take effect. The easiest way, power it down, power it back up. It logs back into the switch or router with the new IP address and everybody's happy. Always be sure that your IMR time and date are set correctly. The reason this is critical is because this is how you retrieve all your data. This is how the button pushes are logged. Every single button transition, if it's from off to on steady, from steady to slow flashing, from slow flashing to fast flashing, from fast flashing to off, whatever that transition is logged and time and date stamped. So you may have someone that only gives a darn about slow flashing lights. They can retrieve that information if they know when it occurred approximately and which points they're concerned with. So the two critical things are the time and date. This is system-wide time and date. It's stamped on every transaction. SMS text messages, this is where you set this all up. So think in terms of setting your cell phone up for internet messaging, like with your email, getting email on your cell phone. Same concept. Your IMR uses email text messages via the internet to send text messages. You got to have a valid outgoing email account, just like your cell phone. So you got to set it up inside the IMR to tell it who to send these to transmit them over the World Wide Web. Email and text go nowhere without an outgoing account. For demonstration purposes, you'll see we used a Gmail account that we created for TechWorks. The username is typically the email address that's associated with that account. The password is the password for that email account with whoever is providing that email address. The return address is if something goes wrong or the email is replied to, where do you want that to go? If you don't put something in there, they'll reply to it and it's just a non-reply. But if you want to be able to get a response back, you need to put in a return email address. Who's it go to? The subject line, if this is an email, there's a subject line at the top. This is what it'll say. It's going to be one heading for every message coming out of this system. So the message will be unique to the point, but the header or subject line will be the same, saying this is coming from Metropolitan Clinic IMR. Your SMT server is super critical. This is your outgoing mail server. So your outgoing SMTP server, you have to tell it very clearly where this thing is going or it doesn't go anywhere. Then you got to tell it security, TSL or SSL. Now, you've got the general stuff set up here in settings. To get an email to come out of this system, you go back to point mapping. This is where you determine what is sent and where it's sent to. So this is the text it's going to send. This is the email address it's going to send to. So the individual email comes out of the point mapping while the general mail server stuff is set in settings, okay? The cell phone number or gateway is also the destination that is put into the point. So that information is specific to a button. This is specific to the system, outbound server. System legends and alerts, the rest of this screen. Legend view style. Off means it's used with NC, meaning there's no colors assigned. It's a light. You can assign the color later in the point map. If you use the 4 colors, it will automatically assign red, yellow, green, and blue to the sequential point maps. 111, 112, 113, 114 will get red, yellow, green, and blue automatically. If you tell it 8 colors, it will make some assumptions about how you're going to address those. Typically, master address 1 through 4, master address 2, 1 through 4. What I mean by that is think in terms of a bright colored master above a pastel colored master on the wall at the nurse's station. The bright colors are going to be assigned to the lower master address, and the next master address in that sequence will be assigned pink, ice blue, white, and purple. Not critical, doesn't have to be that way. This is just an easy way to help you set things up, save you a little time if you guess right in the beginning, but nothing critical. You can change this. Reset the panels on boot. Why would you want to do that? Well, you don't want the IMR getting out of sync with the hardware in the field. So if you reset everything and reboot at startup, then everything starts out with an off status. And then you start pushing buttons and telling it what to do. You don't really want to work on an IMR during business hours if you don't have to. But to get it to sync up, it's always best to start with everything off. Erase all reports. This is if you've been generating a lot of reports while you're doing testing. You've been pushing a lot of buttons randomly. You want to get those out of the system. There's no reason to encumber the system. You can just erase them all. The legend names, this legend up here in the left-hand corner, this is where you name these functions of the colored lights, whether this is 4 or 8 colors. This is where you tell it what these are. See this right here? This is where you type in what the function of these colors is. Tone enables. See these tone enables? You have your on steady light, your slow flash, fast flash, and off. Every one of these can play a different tone. The tone is a wave file. So you can literally upload wave files into the IMR, again, using the upload function that we talked about previously. You can upload wave files into here. It will store them, and then you can select them here. It can be any wave file you want. It could be a barking dog, could be sirens, could be anything. We give you a bunch of them in there to play with. And you can make any of these functions. Now, again, think of an enunciator. So you got the red row. Whenever a red row comes on steady, it would sound this sound. If it comes on slow flashing, it'll sound this tone. If it comes on fast flashing, it'll sound this tone. This is the one that's the most common to use, is the red fast flashing, because you want to enunciate when any red light comes on your display. Okay? Repeat interval. What does that mean? That's how often that wave file replays. So think in terms of, if it's a 0, it's never going to repeat. It's just going to play once and be done. If it's a 1 second wave file and you play it with a 1 as a repeat interval, it's going to play continuously. If you have a 1 second file and you repeat it every 4 seconds, it's going to play, wait 3 seconds, and play it again. Light off tones never repeat. They only play once and stop. Makes sense, right? It's not on anymore, so why have a reminder? Alerts. If a call has not been answered within a set amount of time, should we let an administrator or a backup staff know? You can add or edit alerts to any particular color. So in this screen, if you notice, this right-hand column over here is where you click to add an alert, and this screen pops up. So if I want to add an alert on red color for any red color that wasn't paid attention to, let's assume that's a restroom in a nursing home. You want to pay attention to nursing home restrooms. That could be pretty critical. So you want to make an alert. You click the button here on the right. It gives you this drop-down menu. If there's no existing alert for that color, you will be prompted to add an alert. If there is an existing alert, it'll show up in a list of alerts that already exist, okay? If I'm adding an alert, it'll be this screen here. Or if I'm editing, if I select edit on this alert, it'll also show me this screen. So to make changes to an existing one, let's say you click edit, this pops up. You have the alert trigger. When does it trigger? What causes it? Is it fast flashing? That's what we're going to time. We're going to time the fast flashing function of the red light. You can have different status. You can make unlimited number of alerts and have them for different status. You could track it if it's on steady. You could track it if it's on fast flash. Doesn't matter. You can have as many different alerts as you want. The duration in minutes is how long it's going to wait before it does whatever you tell it to do. The message type, again, can be email or serial, just like a button push type message. The message destination is the either cell phone number at then the carrier, or it can be an email, or it can be a beeper number. This is the message, the exact message that the receiving device gets. So this is what the text message or the beeper display is going to say. SMS message, if our message destination is for one or more text messages, then you click this box. It'll help the IMR process it if it's SMS text. Just makes it quicker. So again, in this email address up here, you can add multiple email addresses. You can also, this list down here is commands. So if you need to do a carriage return or anything, this is just prompting you with little commands that are required for beepers and things like that. And if you want to include certain headers on the message. But it'll do all that if you just add those characters in your message string. Click save. Never forget that part. The user screen. Installer or administrator access levels can edit users. Remember that. Users can only be edited by installers and administrator access levels. They can edit, delete, or add new users. The way you define an individual user affects what they see and what they can do. You want to have the first name of the user, the last name of the user. This is just for reporting purposes. It has nothing to do with how they log in. You could call them anything, but this is what comes up on reporting from a pool and other things. So you want to put as much information in here again to identify that user. The username is not case sensitive. It's required. You got to have it because this is how you identify this user to a pool or anything else. But it is unique to that user, but it's not case sensitive. The password is, however, case sensitive. It can be any length, any combination of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. The access level here is how you define this person's ability to get into the system. If it's a user, it is display only, meaning all they have as a button up here. They have none of these buttons up here. All they get is the home button. All they can do is look at a display. That's it. A super user gets a few other things, but they can't change anything, okay? They can look at things. They can edit assignments, meaning they can, you know, that screen that had the assign and unassigned buttons, they can do that. So you could have a nursing staff person that's a super user. They can see more than their display, but they can't edit point mapping. They're not going to get all this stuff on their menu. And if they go into pooling, the only thing they're going to be able to do is assign and unassign pools, meaning Dr. Jones is here today, that kind of thing. The administrator, again, is an access level for the highest level other than installer. They can edit just about everything in the system. They can run reports, et cetera, et cetera. The installer can do everything, and they can change everything. The biggest difference is they get access to the settings. The administrator doesn't get access to the system-wide settings. The installer does. Editing or adding users. So if you click edit, you're going to get this screen. If you click add, it's going to make you fill out the name, and then it's going to give you this exact same drop-down menu. The display, after you've put in the name and the user credentials, the next thing on this list, in other words, we've already talked about the installer first and last name, username, password, and access level. Now we're here, right here, display. What kind of display do they get to see? This is where you tell them no graphic. They don't get to see nothing. That means they're only allowed to edit whatever they're allowed to edit. They can't look at anything. That makes no sense because most people want to look at something. Or you put list mode, and then they get a list of whatever rooms are active on the system. Bubbles is the little circles, or a floor plan. If there's graphics, you can list the floor plan that they have available. If you have layout floor plans, you have to have uploaded them, and you have to wait a moment before you can assign them. The system takes a moment to log those in and put them up. So if you upload a layout under uploads, you go to layout screen and see if it's there before you go to a user and try and add it to the user. Their default floor plan will be seen whenever that user logs in and clicks the home page. So that's what that is. Now, once you've determined that it's going to be a floor plan, then you have to determine which floor plan, because if you have multiple for a particular facility, you have to determine which one is their default, okay? Show controls means that if there's more than one floor plan for this facility, they get a button off to the left of their screen where they can select between different floor plans. That's good for like higher level staff, nurses, administrators, those kind of people that want to keep track of different parts of the facility. Typically, a doctor doesn't get that because he only cares about his little corner of the world. Double press. There are certain stations in the product family that allow double press. One is in the case of tracking next patient. You can move a patient up in the stack for a provider, meaning you want to make this person the top priority seen next by this doctor. You do that by double pressing the button color for that provider. Let's say it's the doctor, you press green twice within 5 seconds, that moves that room to the top of the stack. Why do we have this checkbox? Because some users shouldn't have that function. You don't want the cleaning lady able to change the doctor's priorities. You might not want the doctor able to change his priorities. Maybe there is a particular staff member that has that responsibility for setting the doctor's priorities. That's the person you want to have that control. You don't want just anybody to have it. Again, this is a user, so you're tying this functionality to that person's ability. Call warning. Did you miss something? If you have layouts and you click this box, then what will happen, you set a time in here, and if you have ignored a call, there's a little menu on the lower right-hand side of your display that shows a list of pending calls and how long they've been waiting. And when it exceeds this time that you put in here in minutes, let's say you want to see every patient within 5 minutes, if you're lagging, those patients will be in a little list on your display, and the ones that have expired will be in red. Again, save your information. The layout screen. This is simply a list of the layouts. There's nothing much you can do here. It's there so that if you want to get rid of a layout, you've decided I don't like this layout, I don't want it anymore, you can delete it. There's not much else you can do on this screen. It's just a list of your floor plans. The way you get these floor plans is to supply TechWorks a clean graphic. Then you supply the point map of your system. Once we get you back the graphics all laid out in an HTML screen, you upload them to your IMR. You can have any number of layouts. It's not restricted. Each layout is given a unique number. So within a project like ear, nose, and throat, you might have 4 different plans. They're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what will appear here. You assign these layouts to users. If the user has that show controls, remember we were looking at that, it's a box you click, can you show controls? Well, if you show controls, it'll list all these different layouts on that person's screen so they can click between them. The delete function is how you would get rid of a layout. Just clean house, just get rid of the layout. It happens. Test panels, these are buttons. So every button you've pushed in the system that's in your point map will show up on this screen as an active button. The installer has total control of the system for programming purposes. You would never use this normally in a system, but the installer can program the whole system without ever getting up. He can sit here and push a test panel without going to the physical hardware. There's no need to run around room to room to push buttons to see what happens with your programming. You can test the results of changes. Buttons are arranged in groups of 4 columns, so it's a lot like a control module for nurse call. Buttons are grayed out if they're not currently active. So these would be buttons that it saw for one reason or another, but they're not currently active in your point mapping. Active buttons are shown in white, and then they change to a color when they're active. Labels. So you see how this button has a number on it? That's the room number that you gave to this in the point editing. If you'd like to know the address of this, you click the label button and it will change this to the address of the point. Sometimes that's helpful. Reset the panels means that you're all done with your programming and you just want everything to turn off. It's an easy way, rather than going around pushing every stinking button in the thing to turn off all your dome lights. It's just a quick and easy way to turn everything off. The About screen. This was the very first screen you saw when you logged on. It tells you all about the IMR you're sitting in front of. Below the logo is the name of the product, the system software, and the firmware. System software is the stuff you see on the screen. The firmware is how it talks to the TechWorks products. Always have this information handy when you call tech support. It really is helpful to know what version of everything you're looking at. Helps Chris and I know how to help. Also, always have that system guide handy when you call. That's it for system programming. We're always available 24/7, 365 at techworksusa.com. There's sales brochures, specifications for architects and engineers. We're always happy to help write a custom spec or design a custom job if need be. Quoting assistance, we're here to help. Technical assistance. Before you call for technical assistance, we hope that you have watched the training videos and you have the installation manual handy, because it's much easier for us to help you by telling you it's on this page of the manual. The other thing is to communicate with us. You're welcome to call, but you're going to get a much more concise response if you send us an email. Go to the website, send us an email with your question. Then we can respond with literature, data sheets, the right page in the manual as to where your answer is located, that type of thing. We're here to help, but phone calls, especially if you don't know what you've got in your hand, aren't always the best. This concludes the TechWorks technical training for the IMR. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your support of TechWorks.